So when I was 2 years old, I fell off a roof. So 7 years later, 9 years old, third grade, I have migraines every day. You know, my mom was always like breaking horses and needing a chiropractor as a result. They were breaking her a lot. She looked at me and she's like, maybe you're just really misaligned. Let's take you to the chiropractor. And I was like, anybody else my age, any other parent would have been like, MRI time, let's find the tumor. I don't remember the third grade. I didn't learn anything. If I made it there, I wouldn't necessarily always stay for the whole day. My dad was a teacher in the school. He taught fifth grade. So I think he may have pulled some strings to get me to the fourth grade, but I had migraines every day. It was interesting. So went to this chiropractor. He looked me over and he was one of these guys who was like best in class kind of thing. He was always going on seminars and teaching. He was one of their gurus and he only used the activator. And his name was Dr. Ross. He assessed me. He's like, what happened to you? He's like, you are so out of alignment. But he started working on me and like I started having headaches instead of once a day, like every day, and it would only go away the next morning. Like go to sleep, wake up the next morning and it was gone. But I might have another one later that kind of came on throughout the day and then I'd have that same on repeat. Kids would come over like on Fridays to come and hang out, you know, like that would just like the routine, like, hey, do you want to come over for, you know, after school and hang out and do some fun things? And I would fall asleep. I'd be like, I'm just gonna lay down for a little while. Just keep playing. And I'd wake up and my friends were gone and my parents were like, so people don't do that. He took my headaches from like every day to like 2 times a week. And I was like, that's a miracle. You know, I would later find out that I had other issues that demanded more specialty, which is what we do here now, and fully resolved the headaches. But I remember like staying on the cobblestone sidewalk, or the aggregate sidewalk, and looking back, and my mom was always asking like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. So Dr. Ross was kind of like the impetus for me becoming a chiropractor. But when I was in grad school, I started having like full like neuropathy in my legs. My face started like tingling like just one side, and my tongue tastes like copper. It tastes like I was licking a 9-volt battery, and it was like shocking my tongue. Like I had all these symptoms. I had TMJ, I had neck pain, my left arm, my left leg, like they felt like they were curling up. Like my left foot started feeling better curling, like it would like kind of curl under. And my hip would kind of draw up during the night when I was unconscious, you know, asleep. My body would like start to kind of contort a little bit, like spasm, and I was just in a terrible amount of pain. Somebody who saw me there going through all this, my cohort, she said, I found the doctor who will take care of you, but it's 3 hours from here, but he won't charge you. And I was a starving student with a family, and it's all like, I'm there. So he went up and got some very specific upper cervical adjustments, something called orthospinology. There's another one very similar called Atlas Orthogonal, which is what we do here. But he corrected that, a misalignment, and it changed my vision. It changed the way I stood. I felt taller. I felt like someone washed my windshield. I didn't have any of these symptoms, so I decided I was going to go into this field. I went back to school, and I went back, you know, drove 3 hours back home. Felt so good the next day. I got up in my apple trees, and I like was trimming, felt my neck go right out. It was just like someone put a dark pillowcase over my head. It was just like brain fog came back, depression, anxiety came back. And it was so fresh. I kind of pushed right here, and I was like, it kind of cleared, and I was like, oh. And then it went back, and then I pushed it and cleared, and then it faded, and I was just like back to square one. And I was poor, so we didn't drive. We couldn't drive back up there and get like the next treatment, you know, it's 3 hours. But it turned me on to this idea. And I also got to experience what life is like staying out of alignment. And so I started to get worse. All these symptoms came back. I would develop later like a full body rash. No one knew where it came from. And I found out that I had mold in my home. About 6 years ago, we found out the house we lived in for those 4 years was full of mold. Back then, before we knew any of this, they started toying around with the idea of like Hodgkin's lymphoma, because I had a very non-tender, non-mobile lymph node off the side of my neck. They're toying with the idea of MS because neuropathy in my legs, and nobody could figure out what's going on. Plus, it's very difficult to diagnose MS because it's a constellation of symptoms, and you know, you're ruling out other things basically. You excluded all the rest, so now it's maybe MS. So anyways, we go down that road, and I end up leaving grad school, going off to practice in Arizona, start getting specialty training in the upper cervical, and I'm finding I'm having to be way too dependent on the doctor. And I'm like, why won't I hold, and why do I still have neuropathy, brain fog, all this stuff? And later would find out that it was actually my gut had become just a mess with 0 gastrointestinal symptoms. But my body had made a mistake, right? Through toxicity, through dysbiosis, through stress, through all the things, started to think that wheat, corn, and soy were problems for me. And so I didn't realize that because it's a staple in my diet. I would eat it, and then 6 hours later or the next day, I'd have symptoms. And so I wasn't very fun to be around, I don't think. I think my wife would tell you that. We were just out of grad school, honey. We're just stressed. It'll blow over. It never did. And finally, moved up here to even here in Colorado Springs and was working with Thrive, and finally sat down with Ian one day and I was like, it's hard to chart. I can't even chart at the end of the day without my legs burning and I can't even focus. And he looks at me and he was like, you got to get this thing figured out. I started piecing together all these dots and just realized that I had a gut that was a mess. I was bordering autoimmune issues. And to this day, like if I do all the wrong things, like I know exactly the storm I can create. And so I abide really, really diligently to the protocol that I created. Unfortunately, right, the doctor who treats himself as a fool for a patient and an idiot for a doctor. And so going through all of that, realized that this is a passion of mine. So I wanted to help other people. And my sister had Graves' disease. My aunt had Graves' disease. My mom, I told you, had fibromyalgia. It was later found out that it was a Lyme disease, now turned bulbar ALS, which is an autoimmune issue. My dad had IBS, depression, anxiety. And I'm just like, it surrounded me. And I'm like, these people can get help if they can just get their diet, their nutrients, their gut, their health, functional medicine. That's how I got into it. When I first came and interviewed with me, he's like, what do you think people care about the most? What do you think the most important thing is to a patient or whatever? And I said, their ability to choose. That's the only thing wars are fought over. It's the only thing people die for. Their families, their ability to choose. And I'm like, that's what we have to give people, is like the ability to direct their own care, empower them, educate them. He's like, if you were to stand in front of a crowd, like go speak in front of people, what's too many? I was like, I'm more worried about too few. I'm like, the more the better, And so we started speaking and lecturing. Now we have a radio show, which if you haven't listened to, encourage you to. It's a lot of fun. Dr. Grammer and I've been doing it for like 6 years. We're so passionate about educating people. That's giving them the ability to say, I want to choose this route instead of what I've been given. We always say the sermon's no longer being spoken in Latin. People want to know. People say, somebody comes in and says, I read on Google. I'm like, good. I'm like, what else did you read? It's not hard to correct somebody if you know the answer. It's like, let me correct you there. Let me just kind of tweak something here. Yep, you got that right, but let's just add this. A lot of the industry in healthcare is like, oh, I hate it when my patients go to Google. I'm like, I love that they're that interested, and that they want to devour some of this information on their own. We like a pre-educated patient. Does that make sense? And sometimes, like I said, you got to tweak some things, and some people are way off in left field and they may have some erroneous ideas, but like I said, they care, and a caring patient is an easily educated patient. We can always teach them what's true and make some changes. But you can see my library at home. I have all these books. It's a great library. But what was missing is in the back page, there was no appointment with the doctor and a lab requisition to go get the labs. We want patients to, feel like they're being empowered. They come in here with the typical cholesterol, blood sugar, liver, kidney, and they're like, the doctor's looking at them saying that they're healthy. And I just look back at them and go, do you feel healthy? And they're like, no. I'm like, all right, let's get into the real, get some more information and get to the real issue. And I think that there's some doctors who will order anything and everything, thinking, well, something's got to shake out. And that's not entirely appropriate either. We want to go looking in the right direction. So we have to use our training and differentially diagnose and say, well, where are things headed? Can we see patterns? And that's really the beauty of functional medicine, is it takes all the systems in your body and says, where are things breaking down? I think that's really the art of functional medicine, is to say, we're not waiting till it has a name, but we do understand physiology. And so we want to make sure we're connecting those dots.
There was something you said in one of the interviews about the labs, and this is something I appreciate about functional medicine so much. And when I look over, especially even my family, everybody's just being like, can you look? I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna see. And I'm like, okay, you're not in the red here, but you're so close. Did anyone talk to you about that?
Today I had a patient, I'm like, if you were my age, this number would be out of range. But because you're older and the average cohort you belong to isn't very healthy in America, but don't have names for their diseases, you're getting away with murder. And he's like, well, let's change that. I'm like, I like your spirit. And so we're not waiting, like I said, till we have a name. I think one of the best books out there is The Disease Delusion by Jeffrey Bland. He's a PhD. He's actually the father of functional medicine. He's the one who started the whole thing. He's like, stop thinking in boxes. We have boxes so that we can hand the box to another doctor. But if you're going to be the doctor who solves this, you need to understand the systems medicine instead of just the symptoms medicine. And so if they have this constellation of symptoms, we call it this. If they're missing 2 of those symptoms, we might call it something different. But where do you draw the lines? Patients don't really care what you call it. Obviously, if it has a name and if it's a condition and it's real serious and there's a treatment for that, we'll definitely refer them in the right direction. But so much of the time they're like you and I, where they're like, you look great, you look healthy, why are you here? And the patient's going, I really just want to get better, So we see so many patients caught in that gap,
I hope that this adds to that effort in the sense of there's, your acute care, right? Like something fell off my body, please put it back on.
Or I need something removed.
There's that gap, right? There's the space there's a void in our healthcare, and that's where functional medicine makes such a huge difference when people understand what it is. And it really is, it's not like we're not at the butcher's, like this is the arm category and this is the leg, right? It's the whole body.
It's so silo-based anymore, and a lot of that's driven by, specialties. That's where some of the money is. It's also, if a doctor specializes in something, that, then they're more unique, it's more niche, it's a little easier to focus on one thing than 1,000 things. So we've got an over 100,000 primary care doctors shortage, right? And we're not primary care physicians, but we see that gap and we go, all right, patients are showing up to the primary care, often being scheduled way out, they've got to wait, and when they finally get there, they get 6 minutes with their doctor. The doctor goes through, oh, sorry, you only get one thing to talk about today, and if he had listened to the other things, he might connect those dots. So patients get frustrated, and they go, well, I'm going to start taking matters into my own hands, which isn't always the right thing. They do need some help and coaching sometimes, and so they come here and we go, okay, let's just sit and talk for 30 minutes. And that's the first thing that blows their mind, right? I'm 30 minutes, I'm going to sit down and tell my story, and we may even go longer than that if we need to and say, tell me more, and what about this, and where have you lived, and what's the environment? I remember in grad school, I had to map out the biochemical pathways of somebody who is on 3 medications, because there's an increase in negative cross-reaction about 75% when you're on more than 3. And that was the whole principle, was go home and map this out and come back and this is your homework. I go to my dad and I say, Dad, I'm kind of sheepish. I'm like, any chance you're on 3 medications or more? And he's like, why? I was like, I told him the assignment. He goes, this will be easy. And he takes me to his office and he pulls a shoebox off the top shelf. He's on 9 medications, all carefully choreographed for different things he couldn't do, like no operating heavy machinery. Well, no worries. He can't lie prostrate. No worries. He slept in his chair. He was an amputee. He had all these different things. And so this basically a cacophony of noise, right? Of pharmacy in his system. And not once did anybody ever address his diet, which was blatantly out of control. It was really out of sorts. We knew his depression came from IBS. We knew his IBS came from his gut. We knew 95% of serotonin is made in the digestive tract. This is a man who was just kind of grumpy all the time, but he blamed all these surgeries. Well, you see what I'm saying? Where I'm going with this is like, nobody ever addressed some of the root issues, and had his doctor have even had a doctor of functional medicine to say, I can refer you to this guy who's going to help you start getting healthy, and we can start taking away some of these unnecessary drugs and medications. That was very possible for him, but he was never given the option.
So much of it, right, is going, let's just take away some of the things that are inflaming you, right? And, for so many, thyroid and all of that, right? Like just people being stressed or the blood sugar spiking, and they're they're inflaming constantly, and better. And
they wake up in the morning, they don't feel like they've rested at all, right? Because their body is like, no, we've been hard at work all night long. This is when we heal. We've got backlogs and backlogs of backlogs. And your body's saying, we got to spend more time in bed so we can get this thing sorted. And we get up and we do all the things that we do, and we make it even harder because we're not aware of where we are in our health, in our crisis, right?
So when patients come in, how do you help them understand, like for instance, if they're like, I love my Instagram holistic coaches, they're functional medicine, they're all functional medicine doctors, like Dr. Hyman, great, we were happy that these people exist so that they're able to get the word out, but like they're like, I think I have it under control. Like how would you help them understand?
I always say, I met Dr. Hyman once, and the hardest thing about it was he didn't remember me at all. And that's mostly just tongue in cheek. Like we feel like we connect with these people, we know them, they're superstars, their influence goes far and wide, but you still have never had an appointment with them. And I think that he would even tell you, these people, he's just one of many, but Dr. David Perlmutter, Dr. Tim O'Brien, all these guys who really know their stuff, they can't sit with you. They would tell you the same. Go to somebody who knows what they're doing, can do the proper tests, and can give you a proper protocol, and isn't just giving you the supplement of the month. And I think that that's really the key here, is that it's person-to-person healthcare, right? This is what functional medicine is it's all about getting one by one, talking individually with each person. And I think it's great sometimes when you see these people want to reach the world, but it's like you forget that the personal touch there is really what makes it happen.
They're like the mascot. They're helping the word get out.
They help the word get out. I love the work that they've all done. It's wonderful. But for me, that was kind of my letdown. I was like, okay, I'm convinced. I've been converted. I know that this is like the path I need to go down. Now somebody help me. And that was what was lacking. Unfortunately, I had to be that doctor for me, because back in the day, this is back in 2010, there was no one, right? There was no one that I could find other than just the stuff that we watch you know, and we're exposed to influence, but it got the ball rolling for me. And I think that that's really what, like you said, it helps so many people just to get educated. Some of these doctors are amazing educators, can teach and convince and persuade and open eyes, but we sometimes have to get very individual.
Like if somebody comes in, do you just generally recommend that they get an idea of what they're sensitive to, their food sensitivities?
I mean, I never start there. We always start with a first tier test, which tells us the what, and then we go into the second tier test, which tell us the how. So like a food sensitivity test, a mold test, a heavy metals test, stool test, that's all the stuff that everybody's really interested in because it's fun to find out like what's in me, right? But symptoms can show up one way, get another patient with the identical symptoms, and they've got two very different conditions. And so the first battery of tests really gives us the best roadmap as to where you are in your health. So we always start there. I think that's just being a good doctor, being responsible, and then we get into the other stuff. Most people find out, they're a little shocked to find out that it's not the foods they're eating, it's what the body has allowed the foods to do. And so we get into that a little bit to say, just avoiding this food isn't gonna fix you. You gotta get into the root of the issue and then you don't have to worry about those foods, right?
People who are interested in coming here, but maybe are feeling nervous about it, or, you know, even like also like I have not, like I said, I took my care into my own hands because I've told my story for a decade straight and I was exhausted, and, you know, I have a little, I mean, even approaching doing care is honestly hard because I've already done it a lot. And, you know, so people who maybe are in that kind of scenario, they're interested, they think they should come, but they're nervous about getting adjusted, or they're nervous about finding things out, or just exhausted.
Well, doctor means teacher, and you know we always tell people where there is no inspiration, there's expiration. And so come to our lectures, get educated, listen to our radio show, come get inspired by the things that we're talking about, and the next step will always be easier. There's stages of change, right? A lot of people we meet are in the pre-contemplative states of change, and we don't expect them to just drop everything and be like, this is it, we're gonna do this. We actually would prefer you know more. And so come in, take advantage of free opportunities to get lectures, learn from us. Like I said, we do a radio show. We've been doing it for a long time. When patients have listened to that or have come to our lectures, they oftentimes are more ready than they were before, because they're like, now I get it. Oh, that applies to me. Oh, that's why you always say that. Oh, that's why this is what I've heard. And it confirms a lot. And I'd rather have a confirmed and ready patient than one that's has trepidation and is nervous. We just like to move them along that route and say, well, you're just not ready, but let's get you educated. When patients are ready, they're actually going to have better results. And so, yeah.